So I want to talk a little bit more about the New York mayoral primary and the lessons it may hold for Democrats elsewhere. You can view my previous thoughts on this in a shorter video. I'll put it up right here. All right, some quick thoughts on the New York mayoral race. I'm going to make 3 points, maybe four. We'll see how this goes. And the main point I was trying to make in that original video is that some of the lessons of this race can be translated to Democrats across the ideological spectrum. That meeting voters directly where they are, utilizing and leveraging social media and more informal means of communication, putting oneself out there, uh, doing the kind of traditional shoe leather, being as much of a public figure as you can be and not hiding behind TV cameras is just an important part of winning an election in the modern era. Understanding that you have to capture the attention of people and work to do that is an important part of campaigning in the modern era. And trying as much as possible to avoid needless arguments and debates over symbolic issues to focus on real material concerns for ordinary voters is part of all of this. These are the things that the Mamdani campaign did remarkably well, and they can, again, translate to other kinds of Democrats across the ideological spectrum. You don't have to be a democratic socialist to take lessons from the Mamdani campaign. And yet, I do think that there is an element of this that is tied up in ideology that Democrats who are closer to the center might do well to heed. And that is that part of what made the Mamdani campaign work, I think, is the synergy that existed between the solutions he was putting forth and the overall message of the campaign. The campaign is relentlessly focused on cost of living, lowering the cost of rent in New York, lowering the cost of groceries in New York, lowering the cost of transportation in New York, a relentless focus on cost of living. And rather than offer up solutions that are somewhat technocratic or abstract, like let's say tax credits or some sort of incentives, the Mamdani campaign, Mamdani put forth direct public intervention or direct state controls. We're going to pilot city-run groceries to work on figuring out ways to lower food prices. We're going to make buses free to deal with transportation costs. We're going to freeze rent to deal with housing costs. Now, disagree or not with these policy ideas, right? There's plenty of room for critique and criticism, but think about the messaging of that. Think about how that messaging interacts with the slogans of the campaign. I'm running on cost of living. I'm running to make New York cheaper, make it more livable for you. And here are the concrete ways that's going to happen. And as a voter, if you are someone, if you are, say, a working class New Yorker who does ride the bus to work or ride the bus to get around, free bus fare is tangible to you in a way that, say, a subsidy might not be. A city-run grocery store is tangible to you in a way that a wage boost might not necessarily be. A tax credit might not necessarily be. And Amdani's solutions, right, are downstream of his ideological commitments, of his belief in the power of the public sector to deliver critical services to ordinary people, and his rejection of a kind of fetishization of the private sector, and his belief that there is such a thing as social goods and that they should be provided by the government. So there's a connection between his ideology and his solutions, right? The problems are real, the problems are objective, the solutions are downstream of his ideology, but politically speaking, those solutions are interacting with his slogans and with his messaging to create something really tangible. And also, they roll off the tongue easy. You don't have to get stuck into a complicated explanation. You don't have to be like, oh, well, tax credits for people making under $50,000. You can just say free bus fare. How are you going to deal with transportation? Free bus fare. How are you going to deal with expensive groceries? City-run grocery stores, right? They're simple. I don't mean this in a provocative way, but it's kind of the same thing that happened in 2016 with Build the Wall. Or, to be less provocative, it's the same thing that happened in 2016 with free college or Medicare for all. They stand for larger sets of ideas. Implementing them will involve their own set of trade-offs and compromises, but they meet, right, a specific concern and need, and they do so in a simple way that reinforces the overall message. And I think one of the issues for maybe more moderate Democrats, more centrist Democrats, more conservative Democrats is precisely the skepticism that may exist for the use of government to do some of these ends leads to write a kind of convoluted way of talking about these things. That you're not just going to say direct public provisioning, you're going to say, well, we'll leverage the private sector to do X, Y, and Z. So, one challenge you might have just operating from the center is exactly this synergy between your campaign messaging and the things you're actually offering and whether they're tangible to people. Now, I can imagine ways in which moderate Democrats might do this, but I think it's something for them to consider as well. That part of what you're trying to accomplish isn't simply a slogan, but also a discrete policy that voters can imagine helping them in a real way. And this is a big country, a very diverse landscape. It's going to look different in different places. But I do think that progressives, left liberals, people just on the left end of the political spectrum are going to have an easier time with this precisely because they have this commitment to public provisioning that their colleagues closer to the center may not actually have. It's easier to make this case when you can just say, we'll do it through state intervention, versus if you are trying to think of some convoluted scheme that doesn't involve the government directly acting on the problem. In a way that's perhaps very unsatisfying to very many people, I think the Mamdani win vindicates a lot of different factions within the Democratic Party. It vindicates one side about the method of campaigning, vindicates another side about the importance of concrete policies. The good news is that this means there are lessons for everyone, things for everyone to take away. The bad news, maybe if you're more factionally focused, is that it doesn't necessarily offer you a cudgel. But then again, I'm not sure that that's the most useful thing right now. Mamdani accomplished something really impressive. And I think right now, the aim for those of us who care about politics and analyze these things and who want to see more liberal politics prevail is to see what you can take away from this that can be translated to many different contexts. And I think I've identified some of those ways. One thing I'll say, and this I guess is just advice for who will likely be the next mayor in the unusual event that he launches this, is that I think the important thing for him is to not try to become a national political figure, to try as much as possible to stay local, to focus on being the best mayor of New York City he can be, because that, more than anything, will demonstrate the ability of people of his ideological persuasion to govern and govern well. And if he does govern well and runs for re-election, then that'll give him an opportunity to become a national political figure, should he want it. But governing New York is a huge job, an unenviable job. And I think that his best approach in this moment is to focus on making New York a showcase for the kind of governance that people from his perspective can bring to the table.